moderating.
No pictures in this class.
No pictures. But you are welcome to record, obviously. At this time, I'm thrilled to welcome the cast of Kill Your Darlings, Dane DeHaan, Daniel Radcliffe, Michael C. Hall. It's like they're paying homage and giving you electronics.
This is really kind.
Hello, I'm Sheila, Movies Online. Question for each of you. What was it that really resonated when you read the script with your character, and was there anything that really surprised you that you discovered about them that you might not have known that wasn't in the script, just in the process of researching it?
Yeah, well, I mean, Lucian Carr to me was entirely a surprise. I didn't really know that he existed, and I didn't know that this story actually happened, so it was all kind of a surprise. You know, he has kind of this charisma and this extroverted quality to him that I think is different from work I've done in the past, and but still a really complicated individual. So it was, you know, he just seemed like a really hard person to wrap my mind around, and that's kind of what attracted me to him. But he was a completely new person to me as a whole.
Reading Alan's diaries from when he was a teenager, and that combined with the character that I saw in the script, he was just somebody that I found him very likable immediately. He seemed, by all accounts, and people who talk about him, to have been very kind and warm and very good company. But also, like, the diaries reveal him, and as does the film, to be this kind of really interesting mix of somebody who had immense confidence in their intellect and in their kind of very rich inner life, but that doesn't marry up with what they presented to the world at that time, because he was kind of still quite reserved and shy as a young man. And I think I was very I think that's a very interesting split in a personality. That's a very interesting sort of difference in where the difference between that kind of inner confidence and that outer shyness was very interesting to me, and something that he was definitely an interesting character, regardless of what else he went on to do in terms of being a poet. He was the man that was in the script was interesting in and of himself.
Yeah, I was aware of this story and went through my period of fascination with the beats, and was excited that it was being told, especially being told as well as it was in John and the Austin script. And I was excited more specifically about the opportunity to humanize and sympathize this guy who was sort of a footnote in a lot of accounts of the formative years of the Beat generation, and was, if anything, characterized as a bit of a two-dimensional villain, stalker, so I liked that the movie seemed to aspire to round him out a bit. That was appealing.
I'm curious, Michael, were you able to do much research on David? Because I know obviously there's a lot out there on all these other characters, but where did you learn about him?
Yeah, there's relatively little, but there was enough in the Book of Martyrdom and Artifice, the Allen Ginsberg journals. There are some real-time accounts of his first meeting with David Cameron, so that was really helpful. There was enough that I could make informed choices as I filled in the blanks that were there. But yeah, there was some research, but it was an imaginative exercise too.
Okay, my question for Daniel. You've been the kids actor and now as a young man, the adult actor. Is there any a point of view being actors you got kind of changed before 5 years ago and now?
I mean, yeah, I think the last sort of, since finishing Potter, there's been a huge journey for me, and it's been, just in terms of, I'd never worked really with different crews before and with different groups of actors before, and so coming to after, because The Woman in Black was filmed in England, and if you've done a Harry Potter film, you're never going to work again in England without knowing somebody on the crew, because there are so many people. So it actually doing Kill Your Darlings was a huge thing for me, because it meant that I just had to I was not going to be working with anybody I knew, and you have to sort of find out who you are again on a film set. Sort of, it felt like sort of starting fresh in a way. But that was really exciting, and you know, working with John Krokidas, our director, he did sort of introduce me to techniques and ways of working that I'd never really been shown before, and it was it was very exciting. So I do think, I don't know what point exactly, but I think sort of from doing How to Succeed, the musical, and through sort of Kill Your Darlings, that was a big period of transition for me in terms of what in the way I worked.
Hi, Angela Dawson for O Features, and I wanted to ask each of you, these beat writers and poets, they have such a staying power. They've been around 50, 60 years, and it seems like every generation, like you said, Michael, you know, relates to it in some way. And I was just wondering, you know, as when you guys were a little bit younger in your case, what did you have some angsty writing and thoughts that you put down that just kind of, you know, either kind of reflected this kind of, you know, feeling that these guys wrote about? And why do you think there is such staying power with these guys?
I think we're still, you know, feeling the ripple effects of the cultural phenomenon or revolution that they perhaps started. And yeah, I think a fascination with their work probably does coincide with a period when you're coming into awareness of the ways in which whatever conventions there are might constrain you. And it speaks to that awareness and appetite to transcend them or break those boundaries or chains. And I definitely have some journal entries that are characterized by ultimately just run-on sentences, but I was really trying to emulate some of what had inspired me.
Yeah, I definitely have my fair share of some real bad poetry. I wrote when I was about 17 or 18. And I think in terms of the beats, I think there's something about the way they did what they did. You know, as somebody who grew up outside the States, you know, they don't have. You know, the thing I compare them to, and the thing I sort of use as my point of connection to them, is the punk movement in the 70s between 75 and 79, and just because that had the same kind of excited nihilism to it, that, you know, just about tearing everything up and starting again, and you know, there's something really thrilling about that, and my English teacher used to say something which I think definitely applies to the beats, about there are two types of poets in the world. There are people who write poetically about their lives, and there are people who live poetically and write about it, and that I think sums up that kind of. There's a wild abandon that goes along with them, that even if you're not, you know, even if you don't get every reference or every allusion, because a lot of the poetry is incredibly dense, you can kind of get swept up in the rhythm and the excitement of it.
You actually published the book, right? Under a new name?
Yes, I'll let Dane answer the question.
Yeah, also guilty of teenage poems of trying to achieve naked self-expression. But listen, I mean, I think that their effect on like today's society is like, it's kind of amazing. Like, it's not just that their books are still celebrated and read, but also like they were the original hipsters, and like where I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, I can't walk down the street without seeing at least 10 people dressed exactly like Jack Kerouac. It's really insane. So they you know, they obviously, their books had this huge impact, but also their entire, what they stood for and how they dressed, and you know, all that stuff still resonates today. Maybe even the most now since then, in terms of like what they stood for and the impacts it's had culturally.
Please tell me you all saved your bad poems and they will be on the DVD.
Yeah, well, as this gentleman alluded to, some of mine were actually, I had the stupidity to have them published under a fake name when I was like 17. And so yeah, they're out there for, they're not actually particularly angsty ones, thankfully, if I remember correctly, but yeah, don't look them up. It's pointless, I know it's pointless saying that now.
So you may as well tell us your pen name.
No, I'm not going to make it that easy for you. Do some of the work.
Right.
Is there any difference in playing people who are in that period versus playing people who are contemporary? I mean, do you think differently about how they grew up or walk differently or do anything differently than you do playing the contemporary character?
For all of you.
Well, yeah. I mean, sure. Yes, absolutely. I don't think it's not like terribly conscious effort, but I think, they certainly spoke differently, and I think that the script does a really good job of capturing the characters' individual voices, but also, emulating the way people would talk in the 40s, and just having like an awareness of what's going on around you and the politics of the time and that kind of thing. I mean, these were people that if they expressed how they truly felt about some things, they would be criminalized and they would go to jail. So that obviously has a deep impact on how you act with those around you, and just having that awareness, I think, affects what you're doing.
Yeah, the one example I can think of as well, which sort of speaks to that, is just the moment before, Dane and I kiss in the park. There's just that you have to have an awareness that, this wouldn't just be. Not only is it a big moment because he wants to kiss him for the first time, but also he does have to check around to see if anyone is there. So I think it does just sort of inform choices and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not something you focus on too dogmatically.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I mean, I think it's, especially with the job that our wardrobe people did, and the script is so well rendered that a lot of it could be unconscious, like Dane said. You could just give over to living in a world that is contextualized in a totally different way. And everybody has different things that are useful, but whether it's listening to music or putting on the clothes or what have you, but yeah.
Was there any sort of research you did into the time period? I know John mentioned movies like Gilda were a big inspiration.
Michael, sort of, the thing I did find very helpful in it all was the music of the period, and just, even if it wasn't exactly period appropriate, there's some stuff there that just sounds very evocative of a time period, and I found, and also was appropriate for. I ended up listening to a lot of Joe Stafford, who I'd never come across before, but I sort of found her online in songs No Other Love and You Belong to Me and stuff like that. I did find, as well as Michael said, the costume and yeah, I mean, I just having an awareness of what the 40s were and what was happening culturally, which I like to think that I do. Yeah.
We had a question right here.
Morning, Brian Rojas, Cinemacy. In the film, Alan and Lucien, they're very excited about disrupting the established order of just the literary movement. Arguably, you as actors, all three of you, have taken some very challenging roles that we've seen you in. I'm wondering if you would consider yourself wanting to challenge the system with some of these roles. Daniel, maybe in this film you could talk about that, but as actors, are you excited about the opportunity that you can take to challenge maybe the rigid, more formulaic parts of the film industry with some of these roles that you're taking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say I was challenging the system quite, but I don't, I like to think that if the choices I make are slightly unexpected or challenging to people, then that is good. That can't be a bad thing, I don't think. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's in any way railing against the industry, but I also do think that we are definitely three, I think, fairly like-minded people in terms of what we value in scripts and in storytelling, and I think we'll all be kind of on the look for more challenging material as a rule than maybe some bigger, I don't know, some other stuff you might be thinking of. That's a very vague answer. So.
Anyone else?
I'm certainly drawn to things that in one way or another could be characterized as subversive.
I'm curious, you said you're all kind of like-minded. I know you've all been on stage. Is that something you bonded over, or do you think that the fact that you get to play really against type on stage is something that you look for in your film roles?
I think we all kind of did bond over the fact that we all do theater. You know, we kind of nerded out a little bit. Yeah, that was something I think we all kind of talked about and bonded over, and talked about the musicals we'd done and the plays we'd done.
Steve, what musicals have you done? Because obviously, you know, Michael was in Chicago. Daniel.
Yeah, well, just in my, youth, I did a lot of musicals. Like in high school and in college, and I did all of them.
Right.
If you admit what musicals you've done, Daniel will tell us his pen name.
Oh, that's
No, I really did. I mean, like, when you're a young person in, like, rural America and what you want to do is act, like, what's available to you is usually musicals. So, like, I did, like, Annie twice. And I think I did A Christmas Carol 12 times.
Please tell me you were Daddy Warbucks.
One time I was Daddy Warbucks, and one time I was the Rooster.
Right here.
Yara for Drama Screen. I have a question regarding the fact that all of these characters were real people, and I'm just wondering if it's a little bit more daunting to portray someone who's a real life person. Is it hard to hold back judgment and portray him, unbiasedly? This is a question for all of you. Did you go into Did you go into work thinking one thing and having to come out thinking something else? Is it more difficult to play someone real as well?
It's fun to have some real things to hold on to. It makes it to some degree a different exercise to play a real person, and I think whether it's purely fictional or based on a real person, judgment must be withheld or not exist in the first place if you're gonna. And in the case of David Cameron, I certainly didn't think of him as a stalker. I thought of him as someone who was in love with the wrong person and couldn't let it go.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you do have a certain responsibility, but also as Michael said, it's fun. There's a lot more material for you to hang on to and really go, he actually did that. This happened, and that is how he responded to that event, and so you get a real insight into somebody's character. So there's you're not starting from scratch in the same way. And as Michael said, I mean, Alan is somebody, out of the three characters we play, he's probably the easiest to find empathy with or something, or compassion. I mean, he was a very, I found him very easy to sympathise with, but there are still moments where, like he's so easily manipulated by Lucian, where there is a part of you that wants to, like, shake him as a person because you're reading about him, but it's fun to sort of just give yourself over to that, and yeah, it's enjoyable. And also, I think John took the pressure off us a lot in this film by telling us not to really research our characters too much past the point that we find them in the movie. So there wasn't really a sense that in any way we were having to live up to the icons that they became. It was just that we were playing them as the people they were at this moment in their lives.
Lucian's a tricky one because I think Lucian worked so hard to make sure the story was never told, and to make sure nobody ever found out about the story, at least while he was living, the best he could. So you know, my responsibility is to honor this person by trying to figure out truthfully who they were at this point of their life, not necessarily how Lucian would want himself to be portrayed in the film, but trying to actually dig to the truth and the facts. And there is, what's great about playing a real person, like they've already said, is, you know, there's real stuff out there. Like a lot of the work is kind of already done for you, you just have to read it.
Any of you played real people before, or was this your first time? I mean, excluding Harry Potter, obviously.
It's an interesting. It is an interesting thing that because there is such a weight of feeling behind that character. That he sort of takes on a reality of its own. I played Rudyard Kipling's son in a TV movie in the UK.
Hey guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
First time.
First time.
Meredith Alloway from thescriptlab.com. So there's so many emotionally and physically intimate scenes in the film, as we all know. Which was the most difficult to shoot, and after shooting, which one helped you grow not only as an actor, but also, you know, as a person?
Well, there's one scene that really stands out for me is the scene where Lucian tells I come back and find Lucian and find it, and he tells me he's leaving. And going off with Jack, and that was a scene that we'd done a lot because it was the audition scene for, well, it was my audition scene when I initially auditioned for Allen, and then it was the scene everybody who was auditioning for Lucian did, so Dane had done it a million times as well, and it was one of those, you know, you worry about a scene that's that intense and emotional, having done it so many times, would you still be able to retain that same sort of feeling and that were like when you first read it. And on the day, just as we started the scene, John kind of asked the crew to leave the room before our first rehearsal, and then just took me to one corner of the room and gave me this like goal, which is just like, he just said to me, like, whatever happens, just don't let Lou leave. And then he took you to the other corner of the room and said something to you that I still don't know what. And then like he just sort of said to us, okay, now just improvise a scene, you know, from without any of the lines. And as somebody who's never really done wasn't used to working in that way, you know, that was it. It should have been intimidating, but it sort of wasn't in that moment. And then within like 2 minutes, I was like crying. Mm-hmm. You know, it was just like very real and it was an amazing exercise, and I'd never really like had that experience of that very intense, real emotional experience during acting before. So that was very, very cool. Thanks.
Dane, what did John say to you?
He doesn't have to say that.
I don't remember.
And your
do you remember any of that day?
No. I don't remember that day.
You don't remember that happening?
I don't think that ever happened. No, I'm just kidding. But I really don't remember what he said.
And your most difficult scene?
I don't know. I mean, that's always such a tricky question for me. You know, when you're making a movie in 24 days, every day presents a whole lot of challenges, truthfully, and every scene is challenging in its own right. And there's a lot of really tough stuff in this film that we had to do really fast, you know. I think John brought up yesterday that the scene with me and Dan on the stairs when he's trying to convince me to stay on the library stairs of Columbia, we shot in 12 minutes, which I think, you know, just is, I think, a good example of the challenge that this entire movie presented, you know.
That water in the Hudson River was pretty cold. I'm surprised Dane didn't mention it because he had no clothes on.
That was really
and then some police just pulled up and were like, what are you doing? You wouldn't do
But I don't know. I mean, I would agree with Dane. It's really hard to single anything out. But I think just tolerating being in a place of such unfulfilled passion, you know, that's just a challenging place to live and tolerate.
I want to thank you guys so much for being here. I think.
Can I get
one more? One more? Sure.
Okay, Andrew Blumenthal from Creative Screenwriting Magazine. I'll
lighten it up with a really fun question for you, Daniel.
Okay.
Okay, that little adorable broom dance you did in the Ginsberg household in Patterson, was that improvised or scripted and choreographed?
Yeah, no.
Set the tone for vibrancy in the movie to come.
Did it? Thank you very much. That was one of those weird things where, like, the song I was doing that to was a completely different song to the one that will be playing in the movie. So, and I knew that at the time, so I was like trying to both dance to the music and make it non-specific. So that's my non-specific jazz dance that you saw there.
I was wondering if there was music at all on set, and if you were just sort of
It was the song that was playing was and it could be like that Pink Floyd thing they do with Dark Side of the Moon. You can sync it up with Wizard of Oz. You could do this if you like with this. It was Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens by Louis Jordan. if you have the inclination one night, you can do that at home.
I just might.
Thank you guys so much for your time. Congratulations on a beautiful movie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.